I do not think that they will indict Donald Trump on criminal charges related to obstruction of justice or the Espionage Act. But I'm not saying that with great confidence, to be completely honest, especially considering the latest report. Trump says the FBI took his passport in Mar-a-Lago raid. Not just one, all three. One of them was expired, but 2 passports. This is an indication that criminal charges may be coming. They took his passports. He can't leave the country. That's interesting. I suppose there's always the argument that it was within a bundle of documents that they seized and didn't realize they took them. But come on. No, I think they took his passports because they are pursuing criminal charges. But the reason why I'm not convinced they're going to charge him, and again, they actually might, I really don't know. I'm just leaning slightly towards no, because they need Trump to run. But maybe they will charge him knowing that they won't stick the charges because they want to damage his ability to run for president in 2024. I got to be honest, though, I don't know if that would actually help or hurt Trump. I mean, the argument is that criminally charging him hurts his chances. That seems to make the most sense. But when Donald Trump comes out and says, they're not after me, they're after you, I'm just in the way, and then they do this, it might light a ton of people up. That being said, it could do the inverse. It could just sour regular working class people. And man, it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. I'd say taking his passport is indicative of charges pending. And maybe that's the play. The Democrats have been funding Republicans, at least their message, because they believe that if MAGA Republicans win the primary, they will lose the general. And that's their best bet. Maybe this was their game plan the whole time. They prop up these MAGA candidates, have Trump endorse all of them. Trump is like got a near perfect streak in terms of his endorsements. I think he's only been wrong a few times on who's won for who he's endorsed. And then right before November, surprise, surprise, October surprise, Donald Trump is indicted. And they say in every commercial, Trump, espionage, selling secrets, don't vote for the people he endorsed. That may be where this is all going. And you know what? Don't take my word for it, but the wisdom of the crowd. According to PredictIt, Ron DeSantis is now the favorite to win the GOP primary. Yeah, polls are one thing. No, seriously, polls are one thing, but PredictIt is different. Polls take into consideration who you want. PredictIt takes into consideration who you think will actually get it. And if you go to a person and say, who are you voting for in the presidential GOP primary? Yeah, most people are going to say Donald Trump by large margins, 2-1 or even 3-1. But what happens if you say, who do you think will be the nominee? PredictIt shows Ron DeSantis. Perhaps because there will be criminal charges and Trump will be unable to run. I don't know. Perhaps it's because Ron DeSantis, just in a lot of ways, is a lot better. In a lot of ways. But I wish I could come here and confidently say I knew it was going to happen. Look, there's a lot of things I predicted wrong, a lot of things I predicted right. There's good reason why they will indict Trump. There's good reason why they will not indict Donald Trump. But this is all part of an FBI search warrant on his home and new revelations from just the past week that Donald Trump is under criminal investigation for obstruction of justice and the Espionage Act. In response, Rand Paul is calling for the end of the Espionage Act. And so I want to talk about this. And I want to show you some evidence. Because people keep saying, well, you weren't calling, you were saying that Hillary Clinton should have been investigated. Yeah, I'll show you. I'll break it all down for you. I'll give you all the evidence and all the facts so you can understand why Joe Biden should be criminally charged, or at the very least investigated, why Hillary Clinton should have been, and why we don't trust the raid on Donald Trump. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to support our work directly. As a member, you get access to our exclusive, uncensored Timcast IRL after show Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. You'll also get access to Tales from the Inverted World, and we are about to launch the new revamped Cast Castle on the website. Then we've got documentaries coming, comedy specials. We are going to be rolling out tons of content on the platform because we need to and want to build culture. With your support as a member, we're going to do a whole lot more. Documentaries are expensive, and that's what we're really going for. Some really good documentaries. You got one on the Federal Reserve. Steve Bannon's come out hard against the Fed. And we've got one on gun control currently in the works, Should be done in maybe 2.5 months, 2 months. So I'm really, really excited for that. And then we're going to do big ad campaigns pushing this documentary on gun control and all that. So smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's read the breaking news. Trump says the FBI took his passport in Mar-a-Lago raid. In a post to Truth Social, former President Donald Trump alleges that the FBI took his passport as part of the massive collection of documents they took with them from home. This could indicate that the FBI believes Trump is a flight risk. Yes, he has his own plane. Let me tell you, let me tell you guys something. When you're as rich as Trump, you don't need a passport. Passports are so that the average person and even some well-off people, some better-known people, can access a country without intervention, right? You go in, there's a guy who doesn't know who you are, and he says, show me your proof, okay, and he stamps it. When you are a billionaire like a Donald Trump, and this is true, when you fly into certain countries, most countries, your people call their people. Trump knows. Like, for instance, he knows the Saudi princes. You think he needs a passport to get in their country? They know who he is. He's going to call them up and say, I've got a security detail. I've got a stretch Escalade. I want champagne. My security will meet with your security, and you will greet me at the private airport where I land. Passports. So this is why I'm not so convinced. I think it may be for show. Quote, wow. In the raid by the FBI of Mar-a-Lago, they stole my 3 passports. One expired along with everything else. This is an assault on a political opponent at a level never seen before in our country. Third world. Trump has claimed the FBI was playing politics. Clearly, they were. Trump then said, or actually, I think he may have said this one first. Republicans could win many additional seats, both in the House and Senate, because of the strong backlash over the raid at Mar-a-Lago. He meant Mar-a-Lago. Polls are showing that some lost Republican territory over the last number of weeks has been more than made up with the unannounced break-in by the FBI, which never should have happened. And I think that's the reality. So again, this is why it's so hard to predict and to know what's happening. Because it's possible the backlash from the FBI will martyr Trump, politically martyr him, And then people are going to come out more enthusiastic than ever to vote for him. You have to expect that backlash. And according to polling data, that's exactly what happened. Conservatives, Republicans, independents, moderates, they're all more likely to vote now because of the raid on Trump. Are Democrats? No. So here's some potentials. The Democrats are just clueless and are accidentally helping Trump, or the FBI is not really political and they're just helping Trump, or the goal is to make Trump out to be a criminal to try and push middle of the road people to the Democrats. But I got to tell you, man, I don't think anybody cares about this. You know what they care about? Under Donald Trump, gas prices got down to about $2. And right now they're at $4. And so Joe Biden and the Democrats can come out and be like, gas prices are down. Come on, man. And they're like, for the 40th consecutive day, gas prices, they're down. And I'm like, dude, gas may have gone down $1. It's still up $2. I still see $4 a gallon gas. Hey, I'm glad the price is coming down. That's a good thing. It was really bad, but we knew prices were always going to come down. Just to what degree will they come down? And to what degree are the Democrats working to get prices down? Oh, I'm sorry. The Democrats are passing bills that will actually drive the prices back up. I'm not saying good or bad. Reality. This is what I don't get. You get all these people on the left and they're like, anti-fascist just means, Antifa just means anti-fascist. And I'm like, actually, Antifascista Action, or whatever it was called, was a militant wing of the Communist Party in Weimar, Germany. I don't understand why you don't just come out and call yourself communists. Why do you have to obfuscate? It's a manipulation. That's what it always is. It's a manipulation. So this is the game they play. They can't just come out and say it. Washington Post ran an article saying, if we're trying to stop Trump from running, there's a different way to do it than prosecution. Yeah, that's what they're going for. Prosecute Trump, try and stop him from running. It ain't just Trump, however. The New York Times reporting that Giuliani is told he is target of a Trump election inquiry in Georgia. Rudolph Giuliani, as former President Trump's personal lawyer, spearheaded efforts to keep Trump in power. They've been told that he's the target of a criminal investigation. He's a lawyer. It's amazing that they've been going after the lawyers of these people. My friends, do you not see what's happening? I think it's funny. I'm getting people hitting me up being like, well, Mr. Poole, come on and talk to us about Civil War now. And it's like, oh, here it comes. It's funny because it's the meme. Like every time Tim says Civil War, take a drink. There you go. On IRL, that's the gag. And it's because it comes up fairly often. But now when you have Trump under criminal investigation as for the Espionage Act, and you have Rudy Giuliani being investigated as the lawyer for Trump, do you see where this is going? The Espionage Act. This one's particularly interesting. Take a look at this. They say, a search warrant newly unsealed on Friday reveals the FBI is investigating Trump for potential violation of the Espionage Act and that agents removed classified documents from the former president's Florida estate. A receipt accompanying the search warrant viewed by Politico in advance of the unsealing shows that Trump possessed documents, including a handwritten note. Documents marked with TSSCI, which indicates one of the highest levels of government classification, and another item labeled Info Re President of France. Also among the items, an item labeled Executive Grant of Clemency re Roger Jason Stone Jr. The warrant shows federal law enforcement was investigating Trump for removal or destruction of records, obstruction of justice, and violating the Espionage Act, which can encompass crimes beyond spying, such as the refusal to return national security documents upon request. Conviction under the statutes can result in imprisonment or fines. There's a few things to say. One, I heard this argument that Trump's lawyers claimed to have cleared the documents as returned to the feds or certified as being like fine, right? Then the FBI raids. I heard people on the right say that proves they're not on the level. And I'm like, that doesn't prove what you think it proves. If the FBI says, give us the documents, you say we did, then they raid you and say, hey, we found documents. Yeah, it looks like you didn't give them all up. Maybe that's why Trump was insinuating they were planting documents. But regardless of this, Donald Trump has broad declassification powers. He can just say they're declassified. I mean, that's the reality. The president decides if something is classified. It wouldn't make sense if that wasn't the case. The president negotiating with foreign powers and be like, I can't talk to you about that. Like, who's going to negotiate? The president's negotiating a nuclear treaty, but he can't talk about nukes? Get out of here. That's insane. They're going to say the documents unsealed after the Justice Department sought their public disclosure amid relentless attacks by Trump and his GOP allies underscore the extraordinary national security threat that federal investigators believe the missing documents presented. The concern grew so acute that Attorney General Merrick Garland approved the unprecedented search of Trump's estate last week. The disclosure of the Trump documents comes 4 days after Trump publicly confirmed the court-authorized search of his Mar-a-Lago home by the FBI, marshaling his political allies to unleash fierce criticism of federal investigators. But the details in the warrant underscore the gravity of the probe, an unprecedented investigation of a former president for mishandling some of the nation's most sensitive secrets. Donald Trump, as the president, decides. Let's talk about it. Rand Paul wants to repeal the Espionage Act amid the Mar-a-Lago investigation. And they're making it sound as though it's like a partisan thing where Rand Paul is this MAGA guy who's like, I got to protect Trump. No. In fact, NPR actually points out that even professors at universities point out the Espionage Act sucks. It's overly broad and dangerous. They're going to describe that it was past World War I, blah, blah, blah. Heidi Kitrosser, a law professor at Northwestern University, hardly a conservative institution, told NPR the danger with the act that it's too vague and broad. The law does not explicitly define what national defense is or what information could threaten it. Although the U.S. has since created a classification system, there's still a lot of room for interpretation. More concerning, the law does not explicitly care about public interest or whether the leaker in the question had good motives. That's why a broad spectrum of people can be under threat. Quote, if the act had a public interest defense, that would give us some kind of focal point around so that we could draw a distinction between somebody leaking information about abusive government program to the American media versus someone storing highly classified secrets in a resort hotel. Agreed. If somebody steals a bunch of stuff and then tries to sell it, that's espionage. If somebody's working in a program, sees it and says, I need to tell the American people about it, that's very different. I think there needs to be a penalty for people who leak information. I think if somebody blows the whistle and it is determined that they did expose a crime, they should be rewarded and regarded as heroes. They are basically coming out being like, here's a crime, but assume you take the risk, like a citizen's arrest. In many instances, depending on the jurisdiction, if you witness a crime and you're like, I got to stop that person, you take a risk. You can go to jail, especially depending on what you do. But let's say you subdue someone. It turns out you were wrong. They can sue you for false imprisonment, among other things. You might get in trouble. You take the risk. Senator Rand Paul said the law was used to jail dissenters. Is that true? Yes. But it would be difficult for the law to be applied the same way today. Sure. The anecdote referred to by Paul has to do with an early section of the law that targeted people who spoke out against the war. This is why free speech is so important. Let's talk about the smears and the manipulations as it pertains to Trump and the investigation. Rolling Stone reported, this was back on July 17th, Trump tells team he needs to be president again to save himself from criminal probes. No, actually, if someone else won, they could pardon him. It would be weird if Trump pardoned himself, although they've talked about how he could. I don't know if he would. No, it's better that Trump support DeSantis and then DeSantis can pardon him, right? Yeah, but they're not going to say that. They say, when Donald Trump formally declares his 2024 candidacy, he won't just be running for another term in the White House. He'll be running away from legal troubles, possible criminal charges, and even his specter of prison time. You see, it's all part of the game. I said a month or so ago or two, Trump needed to declare he was running ASAP to preempt all of this stuff. They got him. What they're doing now. They said this before anything even happened with criminal investigations to get the narrative in the press. That Trump's only running to avoid criminal charges. That way, if he did announce, they could then go, see, we told you he'd run to avoid criminal charges. Now, they've already charged him. I'm sorry. They haven't already charged him. They're seeking charges, it appears. They're investigating charges. If they charge him, then they'll say, see, he's only running because he's being charged. Now, if he announces, see, he's only announcing because they're investigating him. Trump needed to announce ASAP, and he held back. This is where things get really interesting. Predict it. Who will be the 2024 Republican presidential nominee? Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump? Ron DeSantis is now in the lead by 4 cents. As I stated early on, but to clarify in greater detail, PredictIt is wisdom of the crowd. You buy shares. If you think Nikki Haley is going to be the nominee, you can buy a share of yes for 5 cents. So you spend $1, you get 20 shares. Let's say Nikki Haley all of a sudden, for some reason, gets bumped up to 10 cents. You could now sell those shares at 20 cents a share. You see how it works? It's kind of like a stock trading thing. People are betting on Ron DeSantis. The reason his price is going up is because more people are starting to believe that he will be the nominee. Once this ends, I believe the way it works, and I could be wrong, is that if Ron DeSantis does become the nominee, the yes price becomes $1. So there are value bets. You buy 1 share of Nikki Haley at 4 cents. If she became the nominee, you'd get $1 back. It's amazing, right? You do the math. Scale it up. 40 cents, you get $10. For $4, you get $100. Look at that. $4,000 invested in Nikki Haley, you get $100,000. Value bet, although not a good one, I would say. One thing to consider, though, is that you're also betting on the news cycle. The reason Ron DeSantis may be up top right now is not because people really believe that he's going to be number one, he's going to get the nomination, but that with the negative news about press, people are less sure, so they're selling what they had. It's become cheaper. And people, surprisingly, 66 to buy a no, Trump won't be. That's fairly expensive. Interesting. But for Ron DeSantis, 62 cents to buy no. He's in the lead. So the reason it's 66 cents for Trump is because you don't get that much back. You put in 66 cents, the chance that he's not going to be, he's going to be up there. He's going to be up there. So the reason Ron DeSantis may go up is not because people are doubting Trump, actually. I'm just entertaining the possibility. It could be that people expect in the next few months, Ron DeSantis will be heavily promoted. That if Ron DeSantis announces he's running, his yes price will go up, and then you can sell it to people who think he will get it. So there's a lot of factors at play here. But I point this out simply because it's very different from asking who someone will vote for. It shows that many people are starting to predict it ain't going to be Trump, which is fascinating. Now, before we move forward, I didn't highlight this in my earlier segment, and I want to. For all of the people on the left, they're like, you were saying lock her up to Hillary, but what about Trump? Let me show you. First and foremost, Donald Trump has broad declassification powers. James Risch said on May 2017, the minute the president speaks about it to someone, he has the ability to declassify anything at any time without any process. PolitiFact is mostly true. It's mostly true because, there's some subtlety in certain things, but for the most part, the president is the arbiter of classification. It's what he determines. There are other agencies that might label something without his knowledge because there's hierarchy, but the president can do it, which is the difference between Trump and Hillary. She was Secretary of State. She did not have declassification powers. She had classified information on a server, and they said, well, there was no intent. So no crime committed. With Donald Trump, we're supposed to believe that he didn't just declassify it. He's the president. Something doesn't make sense. Additionally, we have this from USA Today, our favorite source, January 29th, 2021. Ex-FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith sentenced to 1-year probation for altering Russia probe email. The former FBI lawyer who altered an email during the Russia investigation that was used to justify the surveillance of former President Trump, campaign advisor Carter Page, was sentenced to 1-year probation on Friday. He pleaded guilty. This dude manipulated an email to claim that Page wasn't a source for the CIA. He was working with the government. Why? So they could justify spying on the Trump campaign. And you think I'm going to believe now that you're on the level after all of this? No thanks. This is where things start getting dangerous. Very dangerous. Trump warns terrible things are about to happen to the U.S. Oh, boy. Yep. He's saying, let me help. We need to lower the tension in this country. And he's right about that. This language is scary language, though. 1 week after FBI agents searched his Mar-a-Lago home, former President Donald Trump said during an interview with Fox News Digital that terrible things are going to happen if American frustrations linked to the search are not abated. The former president said he has offered assistance to the U.S. Department of Justice as its investigation continues because the temperature has to be brought down in this country. If it isn't, terrible things are going to happen, he told Fox News Digital. Days of political debate have followed the FBI search, which Trump has described as a sneak attack on democracy. Newsweek reported last week that an informant tipped off the FBI about classified documents Trump allegedly kept at Mar-a-Lago after leaving the White House, leading to agents' execution of a search warrant on August 8th. I'll entertain the possibility, outright, that Donald Trump was ordered to give back certain documents. His lawyer said, we did. Someone came out and whispered, they didn't actually do it. So the FBI executed a search warrant to get him back. It doesn't mean Trump will be criminally charged. However, I am not giving the benefit of the doubt to the establishment. After everything we've seen, I do not trust them. Sorry. I don't trust Trump on everything. But the media, the FBI, the Democratic establishment has proven they are untrustworthy. Which brings me to our questions about Joe Biden. The Daily Mail reported this in October of 2021. Joe Biden could become embroiled in the FBI's probe into Hunter's finances, experts say. Emails reveal they shared bank accounts, paid each other's bills, and the president may even have funded his son's 2018 drug and prostitute binge. Okay. How could Hunter Biden be collecting $83,000 per month from Burisma and sharing a bank account with his dad? I don't know how you do that legally, because there's going to be huge accounting issues and taxes. Something doesn't make sense. So I want to see Joe Biden investigated. It's not hypocrisy. I think if Donald Trump did something wrong, he should be held accountable for it. I just don't believe them anymore because we see Joe Biden. We see him and they do nothing. We see Hillary Clinton and they do the bare minimum and say, well, it's no intent. Okay. We've seen the lies about Trump. Trump said during his Monday morning interview that tremendous anger exists now in the U.S. following years of scams and witch hunts. He has described the FBI's Mar-a-Lago search as a witch hunt several times over the last week in posts on his social media platform, Truth Social. Trump said there have been years of witch hunts, which he said included investigations into his alleged ties with Russia. And then they break into a president's house, Trump said, adding that no one ever thought a thing like this would happen. It has never happened before. Trump alleged FBI agents were able to take anything from Mar-a-Lago as his team was left outside. He questioned whether agents could have planted items as they were completing their search. Attorney General Merrick Garland has said an attorney for Trump has presented at the time the search was happening and received copies of both a search warrant and property receipt before agents left Mar-a-Lago that day. Trump has denounced the FBI several times in the last week, including in a Sunday post on Truth Social in which he said the Bureau has a long and unrelenting history of being corrupt. After Sunday Truth Social post by Trump suggested radical left Democrats have a complete and total stranglehold over the DOJ and the FBI. Radical left is not the right way to describe them, but problematic establishment corporate left for sure. Federal law enforcement agencies have warned of an increase in threats targeting agents in the wake of the FBI's Mar-a-Lago search. Both Garland and FBI Director Christopher Wray have condemned the unfounded attacks on officers and voiced their support for the DOJ and FBI officials under fire. Violence and threats against law enforcement, including the FBI, are dangerous and should be deeply concerning to all Americans, Wray said in a statement last week. Newsweek reached out for a comment. So where are we going, friends? From Insider, the far right is calling for civil war after the FBI raid on Trump's home. Experts say that fight wouldn't look like the last one. I agree. I think the American Civil War was a unique remnant of the American War for Independence. Thomas Jefferson wanted to include in the Declaration of Independence a statement condemning slavery. It was removed from the from the final draft because Southern states that had slaves would not have fought on the side of independence unless they were guaranteed they could keep doing it. Perhaps it was an error. I'm not sure. The colonies, the leaders, the founding fathers, did not think they'd win. French intervention is what aided them. Perhaps they did not need Southern states if French intervention ultimately came to their assistance. Britain was dealing with a war in Europe and may have just been unable to sustain a war in the colonies as well. It is important to note Quebec was offered to join independence as well. This is the funny thing. A lot of people think there were 13 colonies and they all declared independence and that was it. Britain had more colonies. Canada, those were colonies as well. And they said no. They didn't want to fight for independence. I wonder. The remnants of those issues led to deep-seated hatred and confrontations as northern states started to adhere to the principles enshrined in the Constitution and the founding documents that you can't have slavery. And the South said no. And then eventually the states split up and they fought. Today, some northern states believe some things, some southern states believe other things, but there's no real Mason-Dixon line these days. Today, there are pro-choice states and there's abortion states and anti-abortion states, but there's no delineation. Like they're just state borders. Insider says. They mention Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for defunding the FBI, etc. They say Trump's Mar-a-Lago, the raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago home came at a historically divisive time for the U.S. Fiona Hill, who served as a leading Russia expert on the National Security Council, blah, 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 said that Trump and his allies have created a recipe for communal violence. Hill warned the U.S. could ultimately end up in a civil conflict. I think it's funny that she said that, and I say that, and they call me crazy. The country is at a point in which trust in the different communities and authorities has eroded to such an extent that people just start fighting with each other. I don't think we'd end up in the kind of conflict that we had between the states, the Union and the Confederacy, back in the day. But people's sense of the civil and civic ways of resolving disputes are out the window. The reason it may be similar but not the same is that state borders are unique as to many other civil wars. When you look at like Spain, for instance, you have a country with it has jurisdictions, it has regions and things like that. It probably has states or what, I'm not sure what word they use, but it's very, very small. In the United States, the cultures are very different between states. And natural and legal boundaries, many states have natural boundaries. That's why they're all squiggly lines. They're rivers. And many have straight legal barriers. But legal barriers create easy conflict barriers. Texas doesn't have rangers on the other side of the border, so they're not equipped to defend or attack the other side of the border. But they do have rangers on their side, and so they would be able to defend. State borders are natural lines of delineation in a conflict. And you look at these states. Many states that are conflict border each other. I mean, the potential is absolutely there that there would be some kind of similarity, but I do think it would be particularly different. Trump has issued this warning that they need to bring him in, and they do. Here's what Joe Biden could do to save this nation. And I really mean it. If Joe Biden came out right now and said he was issuing an unconditional pardon of all defendants that have been convicted for their crimes on January 6th, Republicans would have nothing to say, but it was presidential. It was a bold move. It was the right thing. The left would brag about how they're the compassionate ones. The only thing that anyone will be able to do is praise Joe Biden. It is the smartest possible thing the man could do. So why wouldn't he do it? They're leaning into it. They're doubling down to shock and scare and drive a wedge. I see no downside. Now, I think the rioters, the people who actually fought with cops, should be charged. I think what we're seeing in D.C. is egregious, solitary and things like that. I think the people who bumbled their way in should not be charged. I think if you were aware of what's going on, if you were watching the violence and you walked in, you get trespassing. But for these other people who were like welcomed in, no. However, regardless of all that, Joe Biden can prove to be the compassionate and honorable leader by issuing an unconditional pardon and putting an end to this and saying it was wrong what they did. He should come out and say, it was wrong what you did, and you need to know that. But this country is on the verge of something dark, something terrible. And the only way to move forward is to show an olive branch that we are willing to discuss how to move forward. And for that, Joe Biden should issue that pardon. His approval rating would skyrocket, undoubtedly, because the Democrats will gloat and be like, look how good we are. While Trump was saying, lock her up, Joe Biden issued a pardon. Here's what's interesting. Some have suggested, we wrapped on Timcast IRL, and I think it was Jack Posobiec who said maybe they are going to charge Trump. You know why? Because then Joe Biden says, we cannot do this as a country. I am issuing an unconditional pardon and potential and commutation, whatever, of Donald Trump's criminal charges, or so he cannot be charged, etc. And he would say, this is wrong to go after a president in this way, to go after a political rival is incorrect. I will not allow this to proceed further, and I'm issuing an unconditional pardon of Donald Trump. The right would not be happy with it. They'd say, oh, get out, what you don't want, what? The left would be like, oh, look at us, we're the honorable ones. That's the power play. Because then Joe Biden or the Democrats say the only reason Trump is up there is because he was pardoned for his crimes in a sign of good faith. And then they would tell regular Americans, we're here in good faith. We don't want to lock people up. We know how bad things are getting, but we're doing the right thing. In fact, Donald Trump should have done the same thing. Donald Trump could have just come out and said, after the news about the quid pro quo with Ukraine, he does not want political violence. He is pardoning Biden for any of these crimes. The Trump supporters would have been like, honorable. Trump can do no wrong. Some people would have been mad, and the Democrats would have freaked out. But now it'll be Joe Biden. I don't know if that'll actually happen. This one, I got to tell you, there's some things that seem obvious. 1 + 1 = 2, 2 and 1 is 3. What I see here, I have no idea. I don't think they'll indict him because it's just normalcy bias, perhaps, but maybe I'm wrong. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.